I want your perspective on, so I think pandemic is a great example. So when I was reading the book, I was thinking about how would this book change in this new reality, right? So I was thinking about that now. My living room is exposed to work. Now my bedroom sometimes is exposed to work. Now, and many of the struggles, or many of those unforeseen incidents are happening inside the house. Now I have to perform on the work. It's the same toxic environment plus work, and I've been judged. So it's putting a lot of undue pressure, as if you're a worker. So I'm curious, what's your take on, if a worker is listening to this, how would they grapple with this book, this reality?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the reality is, even before the pandemic, people were getting emotionally triggered at work. People were having all those negative costs that I described earlier, without the added pressure of being at home, having kids at home that you're trying to manage for parents who had kids at school-age kids. All the pressures it's like adding a ton of bricks on top of an individual who, like myself, is already extremely sensitive to not wanting to underperform. And so you add all these additional elements. It's like throwing the bricks onto the pile. It just puts the pressure more and more on us, so that when something's happening, it's very normal that when our fears come up, fear of judgment, fear of being excluded, fear of not fitting in, fear of not performing, fear that I'm missing something that's important, fear of not being able to be heard, whatever the fears are, it's like throwing gasoline on the fears with something pandemic and all the related factors. Maybe a family member or yourself got sick, and what the fears do is lead us right into, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. Oh my gosh, my boss thinks I'm not doing a good job. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do when it's time for kids to go back to school? How am I going to go back to work? And concerns of losing income, let alone promotion possibilities. So I think that the way to think about this from just an employee standpoint, any of us in the company, is that the pandemic added additional stressors on top of our normal stressors. And so the unconscious responses very likely were enhanced and enhanced and amplified. That's the word I'm looking for. And so, we may on a normal day feel like, oh, I'm an imposter, or, if they find out I'm really a fraud, or, I'm keeping up this front. The pressure to do that when we're on the unconscious wounded career path, it's like we're going to just explode. It's too much to handle. And so I think, Martha and I are grateful that we've had the opportunity to come together and create this work with our Healing at Work book, because even more so than ever before, with all the pressures that you were just talking about, people that are coming in with these our dysfunctional past, kind of carrying along our past reality with us, unconsciously into the workplace. Now we can actually go, oh, and if you read the book, we talk about Dr. Burns, his 10 distorted ways of thinking, and we start to unwind what's going on in a bumper car moment. And a lot of times the bumper car moment might just be happening in our own heads. Our inner critic narrative going on in our brains is going crazy. And so the book, as teaches people some very pragmatic ways to manage those emotional triggers. And I think you're right, the likelihood and the amplification of the pressure that gets put on people to really pressure up on the limiting beliefs and the fears is just multiplied by 1,000 in a situation like the pandemic.
And if, say, now take the point of view of leader, right? So you are one of the leaders who have gone through, so understood what other, or at least could empathize with the worst of things, what's happening and what's going on, and you have healed through your own sort of painful ways. Now, when you see other leaders, like how do you think other leaders to behave? Like what is your, from this book's vantage point, what is your advice to other leaders who are listening to this?
Mm-hmm.
What is their role through this?
Well, I had an opportunity yesterday to listen to two other amazing authors, Chester Elton and Adrian Gostick, they've written several New York Times bestsellers. Their recent book is called, I think it's their most recent book, Anxiety at Work. And it's such a perfect time to be talking about mental wellness in the workplace because of all the things we've talked about and the added stress and uncertainty with the pandemic and return to campus and all the things that people are thinking about. And, so from a leadership standpoint, I'll talk about some of their great insights in a minute, but from a healing at work standpoint, the leader's job is never to pry, right? This isn't about saying, oh, I see you're having a negative triggered response. Did something negative happen to you when you were little? No, that's not what this is about. But this is about an awareness and an understanding that 2/3 of our employees are wrestling with some of this and most likely unconscious impact from their past. And so, one of the things that Chester and Elton said yesterday, I'm not going to remember everything exactly, was that the leader's role is to notice when someone's, showing up and they seem stressed and worried. It's about, they also mentioned desensitizing, destigmatizing, destigmatizing, some of these things that go on for people, the anxiety and the worry and the stress that we talk about in our book. They talk a lot about anxiety. Leaders' job is to destigmatize that people are naturally dealing with a lot of anxiety right now. And then also they talked about normalizing it, that, we all have our fears and concerns. And that if somebody is demonstrating some behavior that would suggest that they're stressed, it's just a conversation that they suggested in their conversation with our leaders yesterday about just saying, hey, I noticed that. Is there anything I can be doing to support you? And so it's also about empathizing. That was the other point that they made. From a healing at work standpoint, the work that Martha and I are doing, there's also this responsibility of, as a leader, in shaping the cultures of our teams and in finding ways to what's the right word? To take away the charge from the bumper car moments. And so if two colleagues on my team are having a bumper car moment and, tensions have gone up, emotions have gone up, just even being able to say, hey, it seems like we have a bumper car moment going on here. Let's talk about it. And again, we can do that without doing any kind of psychoanalysis or anything like that. I'm certainly not a therapist. I'm a career expert. But we can look at it through a different lens. And actually, Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry have just written a new book called What Happened to You? And that what we typically used to say in the past is, what's wrong with that leader? Why are they acting like that? In their book, they talk about, don't ask, what's wrong with that person. Ask yourself, I wonder what happened to that person that they would behave this particular way. And so it helps us understand some context behind people's behaviors. And also recognizing that most of us, and again, I put myself in the same category, are completely unconscious to how much that past is influencing us. I was unconscious to my need to try to prove myself to my dad. As a little girl, my perception was that what I did was never enough. And therefore that managing the dynamic and trying to manage his anger transformed itself into my career, where I was always trying to make sure that I was doing enough and always worried that a boss or a manager would think that I wasn't doing enough. And therefore, people pleasing is a very dysfunctional way to live your life, frankly. You're not being authentic. People perceive it as manipulative, and it's a very stressful place to be. And so from a leadership standpoint, it's really taking all these things into consideration and then, helping to support people if they need support. And there are lots of different ways to do that.